EMS World Expo is the largest EMS dedicated event in the world, and it's taking you places. And now we bring you Stories from Expo.
Hello, welcome to the EMS Garage and the EMS World podcast. We're coming to you with Stories from Expo 2019 in New Orleans, Louisiana. I don't know if I can say it like Andy Gienapp could say it, but anyway. My name is Chris Montero. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Andy. You are the State EMS Director of Wyoming.
Yes.
Yes. And but you don't sound like you're from Wyoming.
No, not originally. I went to Wyoming about 10 years ago, having done most of my real EMS work in Tennessee and Georgia, a little bit in Pennsylvania, but then migrated west.
Nice. So how do you like being the state? So I've had Ray Bereshansky on. Okay, that's a different guy.
But anyway, I know.
But anyway, what is it like being the guy at the top that you're making all the decisions, you're making all the money? I mean, really, in Wyoming. No,
well, I don't know about all the money.
Right. Well, you are a state bureaucrat, right?
Right, exactly. Right. And it's probably questionable if I'm making all the decisions. But what I tell folks now, the difference between when I was in the field doing the go fast and do cool stuff, paramedic world, as opposed to now, is that really what I find so fascinating about it is I get to touch all aspects of it. So when you sit at that office, it's scope of practice one day, it's national registry issues the next day, it's community paramedicine the day after that. And so I've just had the opportunity to get my hands into a lot of things.
Interesting. So in Wyoming is a very rural state. I mean, I think Wyoming is the size of Colorado, but you have maybe 700,000 people in the state, whereas Colorado has about 7 million. So that can bring up some challenges for EMS. How do you deal with rural EMS in a state where the distances are vast? Yeah.
So just to be super accurate about it, we don't even have 700,000. We have somewhere just north of 500,000 in the entire state. And
how many of those live in Cheyenne?
Of that 500,000, only about 58 to 60,000 live in Cheyenne, maybe another 58 or 60,000 in Casper. And those are our two largest cities. So that entire population, though, is distributed over 97,000 square miles.
Wow.
So we're the least populated state, and the only state that has a lower population density than us is Alaska. Even though they have twice the number of people, it's just they got so much land up there that the math works out for them. So to your question, how do we deal with rural EMS in a state where distances are so vast? It's hugely challenging because our providers, whether they're on the air, in the ground, or on the ground, are traveling enormous distances. We don't have the luxury of a lot of specialty centers within the state. So if you're seriously sick or hurt, in all likelihood, you're going out of state to somewhere, either to Denver, Montana, Idaho, whatever, just where you are in proximity will determine where you go. So it's huge. It's tough to communicate. It's tough to build systems when you don't have a lot of infrastructure that actually makes a system of care work.
So do you have any best practices out there that you'd point and go, and you don't have to name names, but say, we have an EMS system in a rural setting that is doing X, and they're doing it well. Do you have best practices like that, or how are you overcoming that?
So we are starting to see some kind of success models in rural EMS. One of the areas that I point to recently, you actually may have seen in the news, because the hospital became the victim of a ransomware attack. But the EMS in Gillette, Wyoming, which is a hospital-based ambulance service, they have had a dramatic turnaround in the last 2 years, and basically went from operating in the red to the tune of 500 to $750,000 to projecting a 2-point-something million profit off of over the next years.
Holy cow!
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning what they've managed to do up there. And the answer to it really was, it was not rocket science. It was really about taking a hard look with the help of some outside consultation, and figuring out what's really going on, understanding their EMS,
right.
and then looking for those opportunities to change business practices. And then really the big thing is, which I think is the key to success in any EMS or EMS organization, not just in rural America, but it's the willingness to get in there and do the hard work. If you don't have the political will to say, we're going to change this,
good point,
then you might as well just not bother with paying the consultation.
Right, exactly. So, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the state of rural EMS in Wyoming is? And maybe we even broaden it out. Don't even talk about Wyoming. Let's talk about rural EMS in. We're rural, but we have a Costco, so I don't really call us rural, right? We're semi-suburban.
Right.
But when I look at rural America, and I have a real heart for it, and you see story after story after story where these volunteer agencies are closing their doors, what's the magic sauce we could make to keep those people, to really serve that population?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've learned in my 10 years, and by the way, I grew up in rural America,
right,
between eastern central Iowa and Maryland and Tennessee, and I really thought I had an eyeball on what rural looked like until I came to Wyoming, and then I went, holy crap.
Yep.
So I think the first thing is, for those of us who are involved and engaged in rural EMS and system development, is being able to talk about and understand what's really going on.
Right.
And in rural America, just as you said, you can do a Google search and you'll come up with all sorts of horror stories about rural ambulance services closing and the volunteers are going away, and it's doom and gloom. And often the first conversation that happens in rural America is, well, how can we rescue this? How can we go about finding more volunteers?
Right.
Why is it that our volunteers are going away, and what is it that we're going to do about it? And so the first, and then that's quickly followed by the question, well, we can't do anything else because EMS is expensive.
Right.
And so the first thing that I try to guide people on when I have this conversation with them is to say, hang on a second. EMS has always been expensive. It's just the volunteers have been writing the check.
Right.
And now they're leaving.
Right.
And when they leave, what they're literally doing is taking cash out of the system.
Right.
And now you're being confronted with what else? What are we going to do as an alternative?
How do we pay for it? Right.
How do we pay for it? So it's beginning to understand that, and when you throw those numbers in front of a town council or county commission, that really starts to drive it home.
That's great.
And it also begins to drive home that as the volunteer model goes away, the answer is probably not going to be find more volunteers.
Right.
In Wyoming, I can tell you that for a BLS ambulance service, it costs about $550,000, depending on where you are. And for an ALS ambulance, 24/7, it's around $750,000. So, and I would say that's probably typical.
I think that's a very good number. That's very solid.
I think that's probably typical no matter where you are in rural America, even in some urban parts of America, whether you're talking about the Dakotas and Nebraska. And by the way, it's every state that still has a rural volunteer component is experiencing this. Right. But just like any other business in EMS, the primary cost is not the fuel, it's not the tires, it's not the Band-Aids that we buy. It's paying the personnel to do that. And so
that cost of readiness, right? Because we can get paid to go to the call, but yet if you don't have people that can sit there and wait for the call, that's a steeper cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that bill has been footed by the volunteers. And so that cost has always been there, but it's been hidden from the decision makers because they didn't have to buy the cow when the milk was free.
So how then, in a world where we have to start reporting cost in the next year, and then January 1, how are these volunteer systems going to be able to do? I mean, we had to revamp our entire accounting system at my organization just in preparation for what we think they're going to want.
Right.
How is an organization that maybe keeps QuickBooks, and maybe tracks some expenses, how are they going to be able to report that to the federal government? And are we shooting ourselves in the foot?
By reporting?
Well, not by reporting, but making that segment of our industry do that.
Well, I don't see it as shooting ourselves in the foot, because I think that anything, generally speaking, anything that leads to better discussions and understanding about how EMS happens in both urban and rural settings, and then forces the policymakers to consider the reality of what they're up against, is a good thing. And we've struggled for years in EMS to prove that what it is that we do actually does any good, and that's a tough road to hoe. How they do that in rural communities is going to be interesting, but I think that it does I think it points to what the possible solutions are in rural America, and it's dragging out things that leave a very bad taste in rural America's mouth. And I start saying words like contracting for services, aggregating resources, taking a regional approach.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes. You might as well just ask them to give up their firstborn child.
Yep.
But the truth of them, so when you see a story, a tear-jerking story about a small town that can't keep an ambulance going anymore because they're out of volunteers and they're all retiring, they can't get new folks in, that feels very bad because it feels like part of us is dying. So getting people to have the actual discussion of, well, did we really need an ambulance service there in the first place, is a really tough way to go.
Right.
So I think that on that reporting issue, first of all, it's going to give us more data and help us understand what's going on and really confront costs. Two, I think it's going to force the hand of some of the decision makers to say, well, we have to find different business models to do this and look towards ways to aggregate resources and regionalize and other such concepts. So to me, getting more information out, whether it's patient outcome data or fiscal performance data, that to me, that's not going to be anything but good to help us understand all of what's going on.
Well, and I meant by shooting ourselves in the foot that here's my fear, that it's so onerous and it's so hard that volunteer systems go, it's too hard, we're done. Yeah. We're not gonna bill Medicare anymore. And Medicare goes, oh, see, they didn't even need the money in the first place. So I guess I want us as leaders to be out there saying, no, we need to help them supply that data, whatever it takes. If it's free, support from the state, whatever it is, we have to go out there and make sure people can report the data.
Certainly, and that's a great point. And I think to that, people in my position who have the opportunity to help kind of lean into that, that we're going to have to do it, because we're going to have to give them some expertise, because by and large it does. Never mind small rural America, your average paramedic is terrible at running a business.
Right, exactly.
We just are horrible at it. And so I think finding ways to get that in there, and making sure that we end up, the state offices of EMS end up being the buffer between the local provider, no matter who they are, and groups like CMS, to say, all right, wait a minute, we're with you, but you're getting out of control with your application for ET3. So I think those are some of the things that we can do to help balance and manage that process.
Nice. So Andy, what's next for Wyoming? What's next for your state that you were really excited about?
Administrative rules are always a challenge for a state EMS office, and
we're
tearing.
More rules.
We're tearing some of those down.
Good.
I tend to think of it as not writing more rules. Let's just write better ones and replace ones that are in there. So that's a challenge that falls on me. We've got some major revisions going on there. We are starting to see some finally get some traction on the community paramedic programs. Cool. Super excited about a couple of areas, and actually recognize some of our, we have a Rising Star Award that we created in Wyoming to kind of acknowledge new young folks, not me, new young folks that are coming along, that are thinking of new things and trying to push the envelope.
Nice.
And trying to bring some innovation into rural America. Because I really think that that's where the hope for rural EMS lies, is being able to it's being able to deliver value for the dollar, and the more of that we can do. So those are all great things. My staff will shoot me if I fail to mention that next year is our 50th state conference.
Oh, by the way, I was going to mention your conference because I've been to a lot of conferences.
Yeah.
Wyoming's EMS conference, or state EMS conference, is the coolest conference I've ever been to. I love it. People love you there. You're well taken care of. It's at Little America. I mean, it's great. It's a great event, and if you're watching this and you live anywhere near Cheyenne, Wyoming, you should go because it's fantastic.
And
you guys do a great job.
You've been slave labor for us on occasion.
I've been slave labor a bunch of years, but it's the testament to that whole thing. It's just such a great feeling to be there and to see all these people from around your state come together. There's 300 or 400 of them strong. That's huge in a small state like that, to get them all together to talk about doing EMS better. And so you have a cool conference. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the plug. And so next year's 50th, and we're really going to try to pull out the stops and highlight some things. You and Ann are certainly.
Oh, I got to put it on our calendar for
Ann's
August.
invited.
August.
I'm going to have to think about you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll go.
Ann,
I'll go.
Okay.
She always gets the props.
So we just had our first brainstorming session about content and events that we can do at the conference, kind of highlight 50 years of EMS in Wyoming and really 50 years of EMS nationally. Next year will be 50 years for the National Registry.
Wow.
So
it's a big thing.
We're looking forward to that. Yeah, it's pretty huge.
Wow, it's kind of weird because I'm almost 50. That's really bizarre. Isn't that really bizarre? Yeah.
In talking to Bill Seifert earlier, I said, and he mentioned that 50th for the National Registry. I said, and gosh, I've been nationally registered for almost half of that time.
Yeah, I get it.
Now it's getting scared.
So, Andy, how can people find out information about the state of Wyoming and get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we can go to our website, which, like all state websites, it has a
really long, terrible name.
Yeah. Has its good things and its bad things. You can certainly Google and find my email address. All of our contact information is on there.
Nice.
We try to highlight a lot of the special projects that we do. If you drive around on the website, you can find that content, like about our community paramedic programs that are getting up and going, our assessments and the sustainability work that we're doing. So there. Or if you know Chris, he's got my email.
I know how to. It'll be right here.
It'll be right here.
Anyway, they'll figure it out.
This is where I point to a corner.
Down here, right down there. Yeah, right down there. It'll be right down there.
So we're pretty easy to find, and come on out. And our conference it's the best little EMS conference you've never been to.
I completely agree. Well, thank you, Andy. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
And thank you guys for watching the EMS Garage and Stories from Expo here at EMS World Expo 2019 in Louisiana, New Orleans, of course. I'm Chris Montero. Watch more content right here on this channel.